Hello everyone and welcome to this rogue portion of our Knights of the Frozen Throne reviews. With me I have Zamark and we're going to be discussing the rogue cards, a few disclaimers. We're going to be using a 1 to 5 rating system based on playability. So this is how much the cards are going to see play, not necessarily their potential in maybe the right deck or, you know, their best case scenario, or, this is looking forward to this expansion in particular, not future ones. Maybe some cards are good, but they're only going to see support later, and we don't really think they are viable now. This is obviously also before the expansion actually came out, so we haven't really had any chance to play with any of these cards. So, this is mostly theory crafting and speculation. But enough of the disclaimers. Let's get on to the Rogue Death Knight, Valera the Hollow. So the Death Knight cards, they replace your hero. They're like hero cards, so can't be prepped is an important thing here for Rogue. And Valera the Hollow would they will usually also give you a new hero power. They come with 5 armor, and they have usually some kind of effect. In this case, Valera the Hollow is a 9 mana Death Knight, legendary of course, and has Battle Cry gain stealth until your next turn. So basically, you as a hero can't be targeted by minions or spells or anything like that. So it works just like stealth would. Make sure to also attack if you're going to attack with your weapon before playing Valera, as otherwise you will ruin your own stealth.
Yeah, which would just pretty much be a waste of the battle cry, right?
Yeah. And Valera comes with a new hero power. It's a passive hero power. So the first real passive hero power we're getting for standard, well, for constructed really, outside of, let's say,
Constructed, yeah, not because
outside of tavern brawls. Yeah. So we have Death Shadow. It's a passive hero power, as I said. It reads, during your turn, add a shadow reflection to your hand. So a shadow reflection is a card which reads, each time you play a card, transform this into a copy of it. So the idea is, if you play a coin, you get a coin from shadow reflection. Or your shadow reflection will be a coin. And then if you don't play shadow reflection, let's say you coin the cold blood, well, now shadow reflection is a cold blood. And then you play a Vile Spine Slayer, well, now shadow reflection is a Vile Spine Slayer. So shadow
I just want to
reflection,
cover something quickly. The cards that you get from the what is it called again? Shadow
Death
Reflection.
Shadow is the hero power,
It
and shadow
won't copy
reflection replaces.
cards over a value of 5 mana. This has been made clear by Blizzard, so it just won't copy them. Also, um, if you have a reduced version of a card, then
Yeah, from like Emperor Thorison, or if you prep Eviscerate's not going to give you a 0
yeah,
mana
it's not going to copy.
Eviscerate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is important to note. Um, so yeah, what are your thoughts on Valera the Hollow?
I think she's pretty bad. Um, like the battle cry doesn't really do much except for like it keeps you alive a turn, right? But then the issue is it doesn't affect the board, and that's really something that a lot of these Death Knights struggle to do, and especially like the Death Knight we've reviewed and that you've reviewed with other people, like and I'm sure the ones that are upcoming, the ones that affect the board immediately are the better ones, right? And out of all
Yeah.
the Death Knights, this is one of the ones that probably affects the board the least because it basically just says here's 9 mana. Okay, you either give your opponent 9 mana or 10 mana, depending on when you play this, if you went first or second. But basically, you're giving your opponent 9 mana or 10 mana to just do whatever they want on their turn, right?
Yeah, to
It's
completely dominate the board, essentially. You
yeah,
basically need to be killing them the turn after you play Valera the Hollow.
yes,
And the question then is Shadow Reflection ever going to set you up for a OTK? And the answer to that is probably no. There may be some Malagos shenanigans you could pull, maybe some Cold Blood shenanigans, but more likely than not, Shadow Reflection is never really going to set you up for an OTK, and therefore Valera is going to have a relatively low impact. You basically need to be already ahead on the board or something when you play her, and then the battle cry is pretty ineffective anyway.
yeah. So overall, I don't think she's a. I think she's one of the worst Death Knights, and I'm willing to give her a 1 star because I don't think she'll see play.
Yeah, I think that maybe if there was support for some kind of combo deck, it would work, but that is not a deck that really exists. So, yeah, I think we're going to give Valera a 1. And speaking of really excellent rogue legendaries, next we have Lillian Voss, a card that I know you've written about yourself. So tell us a little bit about Lillian Voss.
So Lillian Boss is the new rogue legendary for the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion. And it is a 4 mana 4/5. And sorry, I've actually just lost the text now.
Okay,
Uh,
it has Battle Cry, replace spells in your hand with random spells from your opponent's
yes, that's it.
class.
And so what this means is that oh, and it's a legendary. Sorry, oh yeah, I
Yeah, you
mentioned that
did say.
already. So it's kind of following that thief rogue archetype that we've seen pushed in previous expansions. We've seen cards like Burgle in TGT, Swashbuckler in Karazhan, and most and also cards like
Hallucination.
Ethereal. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, I thought you were
Oh
gonna say
yeah,
hallucination.
Hallucination, which was the most recent one, and Ethereal Peddler, which is the other one. And these cards all kind of fall part of that thief rogue category, which is like you want to steal a bunch of cards from your opponent, and then you want to use them to win the game. Now there are so many issues with this on so many levels. I've literally written an article about this, which we'll link. But anyways, like just to summarize, the main issue is that you're playing with cards from your opponent's class, right? And that means that you have no control over what you're getting because almost all of the cards that get these cards are random. Like it says, replace spells in your hand with random spells
Yeah,
from your opponent's class. It's not like spells of the
and
same mana,
yeah,
or you
you
know
don't
what I
get
mean?
to choose your opponent, so it's like you don't even get to choose a class to get.
Exactly. You could get a bunch of treacheries, for example, like if you're playing against a warlock, or you could get like six corruptions, or you could get a bunch of shatters from mage, and that's the issue with this kind of card. Um, You're also generally replacing good spells, right? Preparation, backstab, eviscerate. These are your typical rogue spells that you're going to have in your typical rogue deck, and these spells are very good. Prep is a great way to get tempo. Eviscerate is 2 damage, 2 mana for 4 damage, and backstab is also just another really big tempo card. So these are very good cards, and now you're suddenly going to go replace them with random ones that you don't even know are good. You don't have any control over it.
Yep.
Hearthstone is a game that's already judged for the amount of randomness. This card doesn't do anything to help that. I just think the card is bad in general. It's bad for Rogue and it's bad for the game. I don't like the card, and 100% 1 star. Just no question about it.
Yep, that was a nice long rant there. And if you want to find more about Zemok's thoughts, he did write an article on Thief Rogue, which was quite interesting and definitely worth reading, especially if you want to find out more about the history of the archetype, as we were mentioning. But yep, Lillian Voss, really not a card that I like. They gave Rogue a decently statted minion for a change. I mean, generally they give the understated minions with some other kind of effect. But in this case, the effect is bad and not something. The only real thing you ever want to replace is Razor Petals, and it's a very weird scenario if you're ever playing this on curve and all only spells you have in your hand are Razor Petals. So ultimately, I agree with you. Lillian Voss, 1 star.
Yeah.
That is,
Sorry about that.
it is pretty terrible and not something that we really want to see as rogue players. Okay, so next we have Spectral Pillager. No, so this is
Yeah.
a 6 mana 5/5 epic minion, and it has combo deal damage equal to the number of other cards you've played this turn. So that's pretty cool. We get a combo based on the number of cards you played, something like like Edwin kind of thing, except in this case, it's dealing damage. So this could be damage to a minion or to opponent hero. So theoretically, you can deal quite a bit of damage with cards like Prep and Coin and whatnot, but ultimately this is a 6 mana 5/5, and that really doesn't leave you that much space to do much alongside it, right?
Look,
Without,
I
with,
think on
with
average it's going to deal 2 damage. I think if you're playing this card on average, you're going to get 2 damage, minimum 1 damage out of it. I don't think, there's fringe cases where you really need a body on board and you're just going to slam it down on 6. But I think a lot of the time, if you are playing this card in your deck, you're going to be coining it on 5. You're going to be maybe playing this in conjunction with prep and something else. I don't want to write off the card. I think the card is decent. I don't think it's bad.
Okay, but my big question becomes, if you're dealing damage, eh, now, if you're dealing damage to a minion, why would you not rather just play Vilespine? This is a slightly better body, but you could play Vilespine and that's guaranteed to kill a minion. Whereas Spectral Pillager, the only reason you would want it over Vilespine is if you sometimes want the flexibility to go face with the damage, right? So,
I'm sure you do. You could play them both in the same deck, like I just think like maybe sometimes you need that 1 damage ping, or to clarify the match. I understand the thing with the Vile Spine, but at the same time this is a 5/5. It's the body is much bigger. It definitely impacts the board. A 3/4 you don't really fear. 5/5 has to be dealt with. Look, I'm not saying the card is anything close to great, but I don't think the card is terrible.
no, I agree the card's not necessarily terrible. I just don't think there's space for it in Rogue, like at all, to be honest. Like, I just think the effect is a little bit underwhelming compared to other cards, and I think that It's a little bit too expensive to really find space. In the later turns with Rogue, that's really not what you want to be
Yeah.
doing. Just
No,
developing
yeah, no, I
five
can't fit it
five
in
and
a
dealing
deck
a bit of
either.
damage. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there. I can't fit it in a deck either, but I'd give it a 2 stars because I think it will. I don't think it's bad. I'm willing to take it 2 stars. It might see playing some very fringe decks, but I don't think it's a 1 star.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not writing it off as a 1 star either. I think that 2 is a fair rating for it. It is just a little bit too awkward, I believe, to
Yeah.
really see play in many, if any, rogue decks. Um, so next we have Doomerang. Doomerang
Uh,
is a 1 mana rogue spell, another epic, and it reads throw your weapon at a minion. It deals damage, then returns to your hand. So essentially, what you can do is you're using a chart, you're shadow stepping your weapon to deal damage to a minion, except you're not getting a reduction on the weapon, right? That's the
yeah.
big
Instead, you're
difference
paying
to
one
shadow
mana.
step. Yeah, said you're paying 1 mana. So definitely a really interesting concept, and the biggest concern is that there may not be good weapons to combo this with, right? Rogue traditionally has been sort of deprived of a lot of really good weapons, but there is a decent one that we'll get to. But looking at this card, like, what are your thoughts about Doomerang? Do you think that it's actually enough value for the 1 mana cost? That it really is it going to be a good enough tempo swing?
I mean,
Like,
the weapon we're going to touch on is Shadow Blade, which we will touch on that, but that's a 3 attack weapon just for
yeah,
reference sake, and it's 3 mana to play as well. Also, the battle cry is good. I don't want to really go. We should have maybe talked about that before Boomerang, but anyways, so the thing is that kind of effect, like the effect on Shadow Blade is good. So you kind of want to replay that effect because it's a battle cry. So weapons with good battle cries or good combo effects, uh, like Petition's Blade. What's it?
Petition's Blade.
Petition's Blade, yeah, that card. Uh, maybe you want the effect from that, and the Shadow Blade, which we'll get to. But
Yeah,
otherwise, I just think that you really don't want to put weapons back in your hand because it can clunk up your hand a bit, and it also encourages you to trade a bit more with your weapons, right? And the thing is, because you don't really just want to equip a weapon and then go face, because then you're not impacting the board, and then your opponent can just spiral the board out of control, right? So when you're playing a weapon, you generally want to trade with it. This is obvious,
yep.
in the early stages of the game at least. And Boomerang kind of encourages you to trade even more with your weapons, right? I mean, there's a scenario where you equip a weapon, hit a minion and then put it back in your hand for when you want to go face later, but that's unlikely. And the issue with trading a lot with your face is you just lose a lot of health, and rogues just don't have ways to deal with health, or just to deal with heal, etc. Like they don't have a way to they don't have taunt and they don't have heal,
Yeah.
so
I
rogues are going to
think
struggle with that.
ultimately I think Doomerang is 1 mana, and that's really useful, right? For a lot of we're talking Miracle Rogues, Tempo Rogues. There's a lot of rogue decks that are very happy to see a nice cheap spell like that can affect the board. But ultimately, it depends on whether there are the weapons to support it, right? Whether you can find good enough targets to Doomerang. So ultimately, I think Doomerang kind of sits at about a 3 for me. I think that given the right decks, it would see play relatively often, but really it is a little bit dependent on the weapons. So,
Yeah.
if there aren't really good weapons, it's going to be more like a 2 or even a 1. But if there are good weapons, then Doomerang definitely could see play, and it is a nice way to get a little bit more value out of your cards, whilst also still sort of affecting the board.
Okay. So what star do you give it?
3.
Oh, you give it a 3 star.
Yeah, I I think it's one of the better rogue cards of a sort of underwhelming rogue
Oh, okay.
set for the.
I'm gonna give it a 1 star because I don't think it's gonna see play. Uh, look, it's okay. I don't think it's gonna see play. So I'm like at all. So I'm gonna give it 1 star. There's a small chance it sees play. Oh, okay. 2 stars, 2 stars, 2 stars, 2 stars.
Okay,
Okay. So next we have Shadow Blade.
well, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, you can
but
do Shadowblade.
yeah. So Shadowblade is a 3 mana 3/2 weapon, which is the weapon that we were referring to just now when we are talking about Doomerang, and it is a rare weapon. And the battle cry is your hero is immune this turn. So you obviously want to play this and then trade into a minion because that issue that we literally just discussed about rogues not having a way to heal and whatnot and take too much damage is mitigated by Shadowblade's battle cry, which is really powerful. And this is the one weapon that could see play, and it's very good. You equip the weapon, you trade into like a 4/3, for example. You're not taking that 4 damage. It's very, very strong effect.
Yeah. Shadowblade, as you mentioned, is a very strong effect for controlling the board. It doesn't really cost you health like most other weapons do, which is the really important part here. And at 3 mana 3/2, we've seen 3 mana 3/2 weapons see play recently in like your mid-range paladins, let's say the Rallying Blade, right? Which even though that also has a battle cry, often the battle cry really doesn't matter. It like very often doesn't come off at all. So, a 3 mana weapon is actually pretty a 3 mana 3/2 weapon, sorry, is actually pretty well situated right now, which is also why I personally like Doomerang because I think it gets even more value out of Shadowblade in particular. I think Shadowblade is the better of the two cards and isn't reliant on something like Doomerang to be good, but
Yes.
Shadowblade is definitely a strong card, I think. And I think
Shadowblade definitely carries Doomerang.
yeah, I think you want to Doomerang your Shadow Blades because unlike in Paladin where they have True Silver Champion as another weapon and the Ashbringer from Tyrion, you actually want to be using this 3/2 weapon a lot more often, right? In Rogue, and so then you kind of need ways you need a way to get a little bit more value from the weapon like that. So that's kind of why I also like Doomerang and with Shadowblade. But ultimately, I think Shadowblade is kind of a 4 for me. It's probably the standout as a good rogue card in this expansion. Blizzard kind of tend to do this to us. They give us mostly bad rogue cards and one or maybe two good ones in an expansion. And I think Shadowblade is the one for this expansion.
Yeah, I'm willing to go to 4 stars. I just think it's a very good card, and I think it has a very high chance to see play, even in your already popular decks. Like it could even fall into a deck like Miracle Rogue. And there's if any new Rogue deck comes up, like a Tempo Rogue or an Aggro Rogue, it'll definitely see play there. So
Yeah,
4 stars from me.
yeah. Shadowblade could definitely be a major part of actually allowing another rogue archetype other than Miracle Rogue, because it can be a little bit clunky in Miracle Rogue, but even in Miracle Rogue, as you say,
Yeah.
it might well see play. So next we have Ruinforge Haunter. This is a 4 mana 5/3 rare minion, and it has during your turn your weapon doesn't lose durability. So obviously another card here meant to synergize with weapons. This is all of this. This is what Blade Flurry died for. Rip. Um, and so we have Runeforge Haunter. So the idea is you play like let's say play Shadowblade, attack, play Runeforge Haunter, attack again with Shadowblade without Shadowblade actually losing durability, right? So you get that extra value without having to Doomerang it back to your hand or something. But Runeforge Haunter is a 4 mana 5/3, and that stat line, it's kind of, we've seen already with Sherazin, it's pretty easy to kill 3 health minions. And
I mean, it
this
dies to
one,
Shadowblade.
yeah, this one doesn't even have a death rattle or anything like that, right? So it's not resilient in any way. It's kind of just the wrong way around for the stats for its effect, right? You
It's
want it to
more
stick on board.
Well, I think that's why, but it also it fits a bit more thematically with Rogue. Rogue generally won't have the highest health, right?
Sure.
Like we don't expect that
Kidnapper.
from Rogue. It's basically 4 mana 5/3 battle cry. If you have a weapon up, give it +1 durability, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because that's what the effect is most of the time. Look, I don't think the card is great. It's interesting. It might see play. Like we built decks for Rogue, and I put one copy of this in my Tempo Rogue that we're gonna go over later. But I don't think that card is actually that good. Even in that slot, it's not great. It's definitely the follow up from Shadowblade. But I don't know if it's Boomerang might just be better, right? Boomerang might just be better than the Red Shot. In fact, it probably is.
Yeah, I think it probably is. I
Yeah.
think Runeforge Haunter is a one kind of leaning on maybe a two if there's enough value from the weapon. I mean, if you do the dream of the envenom weapon kind of shenanigans, this can be
Yeah.
good. But even then, like I really don't really believe in Runeforge Haunter. I think that it just dies too easily. The idea theoretically is that you should be controlling the board with your weapons, so it should be relatively uncontested. But there's so many ways to affect it from off the board as well that
Yeah.
I just don't believe in Runeforge Haunter to be honest. So I'm gonna give Runeforge Haunter a 1.
Me too.
Okay, what do you mean? You're giving it a 2 or no? You're only
Oh,
giving it a
good
1.
one, sir. I give it
Okay,
a 1.
yeah. So next we have Roll the Bones. This is a 2 mana spell for Rogue, and it's rare. And it has draw a card. If it has Death Rattle, cast this again. So
It's a bad card.
Yeah, so if you roll the bones, obviously, into another Death Rattle minion, you get two draws. But we could just play Mimic Pod
I
and
don't.
just
I
draw
hate
two
the
all the
text.
time.
It should say draw card if draw card if it's a minion with dash rattle cost again. Because this
Well,
won't work with cards like
are we sure it doesn't work with Death Rattle, other Death Rattle effects?
it won't work with
Like weapons?
no sorry I mean like Journey Below, right? Like it has death rattle.
Oh, yeah, but it doesn't have Death Rattle. It's a spell that
But it's
binds to a Death
referring to
Rattle.
the card.
But that's like saying roll the bones into roll the bones should just draw you another card.
Yes.
No. Like, that has Death Rattle is fair in that context. I was wondering, like, if you had a Death Rattle weapon or something like that,
Oh no, I'm sure it will. No, I'm sure
then,
it will.
then that it should
Okay,
proc on that.
so long story short of this card, Shiv is better.
Yeah. The only time this is better is if you can consistently roll into Death Rattles, and we kind of discussed that beforehand, and it's really difficult to put enough Death Rattles in your rogue deck without just making it terrible. So your consistency for actually drawing this is bad. It has no effect on the board, whereas Shiv can at least have some minimal effect on the board, and it also draws you a card. So yeah,
1 star
Shiv is
from
just better.
me.
Yeah, 1 star as well. Okay,
Okay, next.
next we have Bone Baron. So speaking of Death Rattles, here's one of the Death Rattle cards you're supposed to be rolling the bones into, and
Bone.
this is a 5 mana 5/5 minion. It is a common and it has Death Rattle. Add two 1/1 skeletons to your hand. So the idea here, getting skeletons in your hand, synergizes with Sherazin. You can bring
Synergizes with
back.
Questing Adventurer.
Yeah, sure. You can bring back Sherazin, and like they are minions, not spells. So it's obviously not really a gadgeter and auctioneer kind of vibe, like unlike the Razor Pedals. But, a 5 mana 5/5, that's not bad. The fact that the minions go to your hand mean it's not really anything more than a 5 mana 5/5. It's not really, it's giving you like half a card. Two 1/1s are pretty much like half a card, really.
Yeah,
Rogue can
and
kind of sometimes turn that into more than half a card, but most of the time it's kind of half a card. So
the
I'm not
card
really very
is
sold on
yeah.
Bone Baron.
The card is meh. Like if it summoned the 1/1s, it would be good, but it doesn't summon, so it doesn't actually really impact the board more than a 5 mana 5/5 does, which isn't much.
Yeah.
I would sooner play a card like Stranglethorn Tiger, um,
Yeah.
or there's the 5 mana Rogue. Rogue has a nice 5 mana epic that when it has stealth, and if it kills a minion when it attacks, it regains stealth. That's a much better card than this.
Sure.
This card is kind of like it's an arena card.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty decent in arena, probably. The big thing to me is just, can you make use of the 1/1 skeletons that you get in your hand, right? And then it
Not
has to
enough
be
though.
Sherazin, and
Yeah.
that's probably not enough because that's such a limited use of it. So, yep, I think Bone Baron is a 1 for me.
One for me too, definitely.
Okay, and next we have Plague Scientist, a card that I
Ooh.
thought was quite interesting. You seem excited. You want to tell everyone what Plague Scientist does?
Plague Scientist is a 3 mana 2/3 common, and the text reads combo give a friendly minion poisonous. It's quite an interesting card. At first, I thought it was Battle Cry, so I thought the card was insane because if it was Battle Cry, it's very good. The main issue with this card is that it is combo. So you're not really playing this on 3 unless you have something like a prep or a backstab in your hand. Initially, I was like, okay, this fits into Tempo Rogue quite naturally. You have your 1 drops, you have your 2 drops, and then you just play this on 3. The issue with that is that it is combo, right? And you're gonna have to combo it off. So you're playing this card more on turn 4, 5, 6, right? And by that stage of the game, you've just got other cards that do the job as well, right? You have, and then you don't have to trade. So you've got cards like Sap, you've got cards like your Valspine Slayer. Look, I still think Plague Scientist is good. It has a lot of potential, but I just feel like that the role that it's trying to fill is already well occupied by cards that the
Yep.
Rogue has access to.
Yeah, I mean, Rogue has a lot of ways to really kill minions right now. I mean, even like in Venom Weapon, right? Like, that's more consistently gonna have a target than Plague Scientist.
Yes, because you
Uh,
dag on 2 and then you play this. Whereas with playing a minion on 2, you still can't just play this, right? It
yes.
doesn't work like that.
But even then, like, if you're trading your 2 drop into a 2 drop, what really value are you getting? And you're just developing a 2/3, right? Like, Plague Scientist is so understated, you need to be playing it later in the game. A,
Yes.
to activate the combo, and B, to not just be punished by the thing. You have to be playing like swashbuckler that brings out a patches, and then you play scientist to patches to kill something. But it's like such a fringe scenario. It just really doesn't seem good in like most of the times. And as you mentioned, cards like Vilespine, Sap, Eviscerates even half the time is going to be better than this because it'll kill the minion as well. Like Plague Scientist really just seems like a one, sadly to me. Another good arena card. Yay for rogues in arena.
Okay, and last off, we have another common card for Rogue. It is a 2-mana spell called Leeching Poison, and the text reads, "Give your weapon lifesteal." Uh, Look, this kind of fills that role, that this issue that I was talking about earlier about rogues not having healing. But the main issue with this card is that, look, if you're giving your weapon lifesteal and you actually want to gain health by doing that, you're gonna pretty much have to go face by doing that, which means once again falling into this issue that I mentioned earlier. If you're going face with your weapon, you're not impacting the board with your weapon. That's one of the main powers of weapons, is that you play them and then you're able to leverage the weapon for board control, right? You exchange health in for board control. The
Yep.
lifesteal can mitigate that. It can make it a little bit less, right? But if you actually want it to really have an effect, you need to go face, and just going face with your weapons with rogue is generally not what you want to be doing, at least in the first eight turns usually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That,
so I just don't think the card is very good, and I don't think it'll see play because it doesn't really do anything.
yeah. The big thing is, even though it looks like, oh, rogue's finally getting healing, really all you ever do at best is mitigate, because if you're not killing minions, they're hitting you, and then you're just losing health anyways. So, you know, if you're not controlling the board, Leeching Poison does nothing. The only decks that the healing can be useful against is something like Mage, something that wants to burn with spells from hand. But otherwise, mostly of the time, Leeching Poison is pretty bad, to be honest. It's really not going to see play. And you need to hit a weapon with high durability. And to be honest, Rogues only have one of those, and that's Assassin's Blade. And I'm not going to play Assassin's Blade so that I can play Leeching Poison. So Leeching Poison gets a 1 from me.
Yep, same here.
Okay, so now we can get on to the deck part. So, in a lot of our building, we kind of started building a deck and then it basically turned into Miracle Rogue. So, obviously, Miracle Rogue's still going to be a thing. There's maybe one or two cards that can sneak their way in. Maybe something like the Shadow Blade, possibly even Doomerang, but mostly we're looking at like Shadow Blade having an effect on Miracle Rogue, right? So, we're not really going to talk about Miracle Rogue now. We're going to start off on some newer rogue archetypes. Firstly, we have two Tempo Rogue lists. So we both sort of independently built Tempo Rogue lists with some differing synergies. Some of the main synergies in these decks, though, are Shadowblade and Dread Corsair is great for Tempo. It brings out your patches, and the Dread Corsair coming down as a one-cost minion is really valuable. We've seen that a lot with like Rallying Blade in Paladin as well. And so, there's definitely some synergy there, as well as you know, just Cold Blood once again is great in a deck like that, where you sometimes will bring out patches and you can actually Cold Blood patches that same turn even. Um, as well as both of our decks have kind of gone for Sprint as a draw engine. Your deck on the left here of the for the viewers has Questing Adventurers in, which is kind of something I sort of disagree a little bit with, as well as like Deadly Poisons and stuff. Can you sort of give us an idea as to why you've gone for that kind of a choice?
Okay, so I just want to, I mean, to kind of explain the questing pick. It seems a bit weird. I mean, you could probably play one and play two SI7s that, oh, sorry. You could probably play one questing and two SI7s. That probably makes a bit more sense. But the questing is just because, we're playing double sprint, so I was like, okay, if I'm playing double sprint, I want to play double prep. And we're already playing backstabs and cold bloods and swashbucklers and avers and saps. Like, these are all cards that synergize very well with prep and are cheap cards, right? So if you're playing the questing, it's relatively easy to build it up. So it's not necessarily a turn 3 play, although it can be. You can go questing, prep, avis, or, to just swap the tempo, really, or questing, prep, sap. But it could just be a good turn 5 or turn 6 play even. And I think it can just win games on their own, which we know questings can do.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're more commonly seen in Miracle Rogue, where you can use the Gadget Stand to refill your hand and make the questings even bigger. But I think look, I have seen builds in the past just like decks that are kind of tempo rogues and then they have questings in it. That was kind of my inspiration for this. I have seen decks with the draw engine of prep sprint and then they have the questings in there. So I thought, you know what, why not? We're just theory crafting, and it could be interesting. The deadly poisons, um, they're mainly just to help out with the Dread Corsair. I didn't really want to go too all in on the weapons. I wasn't playing boomerangs. I didn't think that two Shadow Blades alone are good enough to carry the Dread Corsair, and I thought that Deadly Poison synergizes well with the Questing Adventurer and the Dread Corsair, and then of course the Shadow Blade. And you'll notice that if one of the differences between my build and one of the differences between my build and Dib's build is the Doomerang. Yeah, I was about to say that. The Doomerang is that he has the Doomerangs and I have the Deadly Poisons. Now, I'm not going to have Doomerangs and Deadly Poisons because that doesn't make any sense. I don't really like Doomerang as much as Dib does, so Deadly Poisons are on my list. Otherwise, it's pretty similar. The
You
only
also
other
have the Runeforge Haunter.
Yes. The Runeforge Haunter is a bit of an interesting one. That slot is literally just a flex spot, and I thought it's a four drop, and there's only one. That's the only true four drop, right? Otherwise, it's prep sprint. That's the other four drop, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just wanted some kind of late game. Initially, that was Leroy, and then I had some backstabs in here as well. But I was like, I mean, not backstabs, shadow steps, but the Haunter is okay on four if you can get that third hit with the Shadow Blade to go through. So. Yeah. Any
Yeah,
anything to
so
say about?
otherwise, like you also have Huckster, which I suppose is just a value thing, right? The other nice thing about Huckster is that you can actually play Huckster on 2 with this deck because you have Shadowblade to follow up on 3, so you don't need to dagger on 2 kind of thing, which is why Huckster has always been a little bit awkward in rogues traditionally,
Yeah.
as we don't really want 2 drops a lot of the time. And then the other um, thing is like questing in your deck is basically kind of a finisher, right? You're looking to have questing be a win condition if it gets quite big. Whereas, let's say my deck is more has some other mid-rangey threats where I have a little bit more of the sort of pirate vibe going. There's not really much pirate synergy other than just patches. You know, I'm not playing captain, although I did consider it for a while. But there is South Sea Squidface, which is another way of buffing up the weapon, which can help with Doomerang, help with Dread Corsair as well when it dies. And then Lucky Do Buccaneer, which is a sort of payoff for buffing your weapon or for playing a Shadow Blade and holding it. You get the Lucky Do Buccaneer, which is from Whispers of the Old God? No. I don't. From
Yeah, it is.
Mean Streets. No, Mean Streets, the Gadget time, wasn't it?
Where is it?
Yeah, older expansion,
Yeah.
but it's basically a 6 mana 5/5 that gets +4/+4 if you have a weapon with 3 or more
It's a
attacks.
very
So
random card.
yeah, a card that's never really seen play because it really hasn't had an archetype in Rogue, and just a card that I thought was maybe worth revisiting for this kind of deck. The other interesting synergy that I have is the Perdition's Blade. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. So the idea is you can use Perdition's Blade with Doomerang, and you get more value from the Doomerang as well because the Perdition's Blade has the Battle Cry or the combo effect as well. So you can use that to more aggressively control the board as well and you get more value from bouncing it back to your hand rather than just, let's say, the Shadow Blade um, Battle Cry, which is only making you immune, right? You can actually, instead of being immune, you actually can destroy minions with it. And it also helps the Dread Corsair make it a little bit cheaper. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite activate the Lucky Do Buccaneer, which is why there's only really one of each of those in the deck.
Yeah,
But, you
that's
know,
the main thing. Is I don't like the Lucky Do Buccaneer because it only really synergizes with the Shadow Blade, and you can say it synergizes with the South Sea Squid Face, but then you basically have to have the single South Sea Squid Face on four because ideally you want a Shadow Blade or Petition's Blade on three,
So,
right?
Lucky Do Buccaneer also synergizes with Doomerang because Doomerang is returning the weapon to your hand. It's
Yes,
essentially giving
that's
you
the other thing.
another copy of the 3 attack weapon, right?
Yeah.
And that's the big important thing that actually I think might make Lucky Do Buccaneer viable is that
Would you?
you can hold. So when you Doomerang, you don't have to then play the weapon again on 4 or 5. You can play the weapon on. Well, you can play the weapon on 5 into Lucky Do Buccaneer on 6, or you can go something like you do Meringue and then you play Squid Face on 4 and
Yeah.
something like that, and then you can trade the Squid Face as you attack as you play the Shadow Blade kind of thing. And or trade the Squid Face and Hero Power, and you don't have to use the weapon that you get back from the Doomerang immediately. I agree, Doomerang might not be good enough for this deck. It really is a little bit fringe and a little bit cute. Its interactions with Petition's Blade and Shadow Blade, but it's definitely something worth trying and something that I'm keen to try in Rogue at least. We're always keen to see what other kind of archetypes we can get out of Rogue, and as you said, this is theory crafting, so you were sort of experimenting with your Runeforge Haunter, and I'm kind of experimenting a bit with the Doomerang, although I really do see quite a lot of potential for it if you can make it work. Really, this deck does kind of really need Shadowblade, right? Like, my deck is a lot more, let's say, reliant on actually drawing the Shadowblade a lot of the time,
Yeah, so
which
that's
can
the
be
why
a
I
bit
kind of like the
of a
deadly
concern.
poisons, right? Because it's the
But sha-
second.
but it but it doesn't really act that well as a second Shadow Blade, I don't think. Like
No, no, I
I,
just
I
think like
honestly prefer Petition's Blade as a way to reduce my Dread Corsair in particular, or as a target to buff up with Squid Face. But Squid Face
yeah.
can also buff the hero power. And yeah, anyway, it's kind of a similar.
I
I
just want to
also
see the
cut the one
inter.
sprint because I feel probably only need one. The the with the slightly extra value that I have in the Squid Face and the Buccaneer as well.
I just want to see the animation for Doomerang.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool, hopefully.
Hopefully.
So lastly, we have your favorite a rogue deck with one of your favorite rogue cards, and this is a rogue deck you gave me. So why is Lillian Voss in this deck? After you gave it a 1 and told us it would never see play.
Yeah, I made this deck for fun. I think if you build Thief Rogue, this is how you build it. I'm pretty sure. Once again, you're gonna see questings randomly for no real reason. We do have the double prep, the double sprint, and a bunch of cheap spells. We've got the sorry, a bunch of cheap cards. We've got the swashbucklers. We've got the eviscerates. We've got the petals from the Razor Petal Lasher. I think they're called petals.
Yep, Razor Petals.
Uh,
But yeah,
but basically, it's just all the thief cards. Well, almost all the thief cards. So we've got double hallucination, um, double
Swashbuckler.
Undercity Huckster, Shaku, and Lillian Voss, and then of course the double. I mean, yeah, the double ethereal peddler. I opted not to put in. Man,
Burgle because it's terrible.
sorry,
Burgle because it's terrible.
Burgles in TGT. That's the other issue.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Man,
Burgles TGT. I'm just trying to remember. There's another card that I opted not to put in, but I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. Um,
yeah, but
but
you have
yeah,
the Swashbuckler as well for an extra card steal. So the idea here is that you shouldn't really hopefully have many of your own spells in your hand. So like if you ever play Lillian Voss whilst you have prep in your hand, that's pretty bad. Like you really don't want to do that. You actually don't want to draw prep or even Mimic Pod, right? Like early in the game. Is it maybe not better in a deck like Lillian Voss deck to actually play less spells then, so that Lillian Voss is not transforming your like maybe you don't play Mimic Pod, maybe play even Razor Petal Volley, as horrible as that card is. The 2 mana one
so
that gives you
as
2/1
much as I dislike
petals.
Lillian Voss, I thought the one way to make it work is you get a rogue deck that works, and then you put it in. Look, I just need to say that this is like a funsies deck, right? Like the deck is never gonna be competitive. It's never gonna try be this amazing deck that wins games left, right, and center, right? But I thought that if you do want to make Lillian Voss work, you probably put in a deck where the spells are good on their own, and if you replace them, you're either in that winning position or the cards are dead. So you play Lillian Voss if you just have a dead prep in your hand, or if you have a mimic pod, but you know there's no cards that you actually want to mimic pod into, because a lot of the time that is going to be the case. Maybe you've drawn both hallucinations. Maybe you've drawn. Um,
Edwin.
I don't know. There's actually not that many cards that you want a mimic pod, but I do think there's enough to warrant the mimic pod. And so your Lillian Voss is really just to clean up that. Even like a dead sprint in the hand, sprint can be very heavy at 7 mana. And if you don't have any preps, you probably want to just replace that sprint using the Lillian Voss. And then, of course, we've got the Ethereal Peddler, which is just a direct follow-up to the Lillian Voss. There was consideration for Shadow Steps to get synergy with Swashbuckler and Ethereal Peddler and even Lillian Voss if you're unhappy with the spells you get. But in the end, I ended up cutting them, and instead we have two Razor Petal Lashes. The one damage, 1 mana spells can be used with both. I mean, with Blood Mage
Thalnos.
Thalnos. Yeah, Blood Mage Thalnos. They're good with Edwin Van Cleef, Questing Adventurer, and they're also good with Lillian Voss, which was, of course, the primary reason that they're in the deck.
Yeah,
Uh,
so
I don't even think the deck doesn't look terrible, but it's
Lillian
just
Voss
pretty.
doesn't make it better though. It's not a deck you
Yes,
ever craft Lillian Voss to make, right?
yes, yes,
Lillian
yes.
Voss is just occasionally you go Lillian Voss Ethereal Peddler and you get a bunch of like free primordial glyphs or something
Yeah.
stupid like that, you know?
So
And it kind of works out, but most of the time it's probably just better to play a real deck like Miracle Rogue or hopefully
yeah,
Tempo
so
Rogue.
I want to
Because
point something out. We touched on it at the start, but when we were doing deck building for Rogue, we just kept on coming back to Miracle Rogue, and so like you come up with the deck and you're like, okay, well if I'm playing these cards, I may as well just play this card and this card and this card, and you kind of follow this chain. Like, okay, I'm playing Preps, I may as well play the Edwin, and then you're playing Edwin, you're like, okay, but I want to make the Edwin bigger, so maybe I'll just play Backstabs, and you're like, Backstabs, okay, well shouldn't I just be playing Auctioneers? And a lot of the time you end up with Miracle Rogue. If you
yeah,
look at this deck, and I promise you, I didn't start with Miracle and go backwards, but if you look at this deck, if you cut the Hucksters, we'll leave Shadowblades in because you don't even need to do that. If you just cut Hucksters, you cut Lillian Voss, you cut the Sprint and the Ethereal Peddlers. That's 5 slots, right? Double Auctioneer, double Arcane Giant, and like a Shiv, right?
I won't lie. I looked at the list and I was like, Arcane Giant might be good in this deck.
Yeah, exactly. So like suddenly, like we've just cut 5 cards. I mean, you can cut 4 even, right? Like you could even leave a Huxley in, and it's just like a weird variation of Miracle Rogue. And that's the thing with Rogue at the moment is just a lot of decks that you might come up with. We even theory crafted a few in Zoth decks that we ended up just not putting in because they just ended up being like 4 cards off Miracle Rogue, or they were just
Yeah,
objective worse than Miracle Rogue, right?
yeah.
And that's the kind of the situation we're in with Rogue at the moment. So hopefully the tempo Rogues will rise. Otherwise, we'll just be playing more Miracle Rogue, which I'm happy with, but still, I'm looking forward to a new Rogue archetype, hopefully in this expansion.
Yeah, so I mean that brings us to the sort of closing topic for this Rogue review. Where do we see Rogue in terms of the meta? And I think Miracle Rogue is still going to be pretty strong. I think that there's been enough cards in other classes to discourage people from playing aggro. Not necessarily. I'm not saying aggro is dead or anything, but there's enough cards that are going to have other people playing slightly more greedy decks, and I think that Miracle Rogue can take good advantage of that. I think the deck is still pretty healthy. Shadowblade is a pretty good card. Maybe even helps Miracle Rogue out a bit. And maybe we see a Tempo Rogue, but I'd say that's like it's probably just going to be worse than Miracle Rogue or other decks out there. So it's probably not going to see much play outside of people experimenting, like we even saw with Jade Rogue as well. It was just worse than playing other Jade decks and just worse than playing Miracle Rogue. So the health of Rogue, I think Rogue will still be fine, but it is going to be largely reliant on Miracle Rogue for its position in the meta.
Certainly.
So, yep, that's all we really have for Rogue. Thanks for joining me. If you want to find us, you can find Zaymok on Twitter at Zaymok_HS and myself at Dev_gaming. And we will have links to Zaymok's article on the Thief Rogue stuff in the description, as well as links to all the decks. And please like, follow, subscribe, comment. Let us know if you have any um, ideas. Anything you think we missed. Maybe you think there's another interesting deck archetype, rogue deck archetype that we missed, or something like that. Let us know. I'm definitely interested to see what people can come up with Rogue, because Rogue is always a very difficult deck to theory craft, or class to theory craft, to be honest. And it seems like, honestly, Blizzard kind of struggle when it comes to developing cards for Rogue as well. So, yep, that's all we have time for in this
Cheers, guys.
review. We'll be back for another one soon.